Lucia had never felt the kind of fear that clung to her like a shadow until the day she finally left him. Her ex had been controlling, suffocating, a constant storm that drained her soul. The night she packed her bags, she left silently, not looking back. She needed a life that was hers alone. The city she arrived in was vast and unfamiliar, its streets lit by neon signs that flickered like distant stars. The air smelled faintly of rain and asphalt, carrying with it a promise of anonymity. Lucia found a small apartment on the upper floor of an aging building. The walls were thin, the paint chipped, but it was hers. A safe beginning, but survival meant work. She wandered the streets in the morning light, handing out resumes with trembling hands and hopeful eyes. It was late afternoon when she stumbled upon a small, elegant bar tucked between a bakery and a bookstore. Its wooden sign swayed slightly with the wind, painted letters glowing faintly under the street lamp. A warmth seemed to radiate from within. She pushed the door open, and a soft chime echoed behind her. The bar smelled of polished wood and spiced drinks. Shelves lined with bottles of amber and ruby liquid reflected the warm light. Behind the counter stood a man with dark hair and eyes that seemed almost too sharp, too knowing. His presence was quiet yet commanding, like the calm before a storm. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice deep but measured. Lucia swallowed, keeping her hands clasped together. I'm looking for work," she said. Her voice was steady, but her heart pounded. He studied her for a moment, tilting his head slightly. "We might have something. Can you start tonight?" Something in the way he said it made her pause. But there was also a hint of trust, of challenge in his gaze. She nodded. "Yes, I can start tonight." And just like that, her new life began. The first hours behind the bar were awkward. Lucia tried to remember every instruction, every detail. She wiped tables, filled glasses, and greeted patrons with a polite smile. Every now and then, she would glance at the man who seemed to move through the bar with ease. He spoke little, yet his eyes never left her. Later, when the crowd had thinned, he finally spoke. "You handle yourself well under pressure," he said, leaning against the counter. Lucia felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Thank you," she murmured, unsure what to make of his words. There was respect in his tone, but something else, something unreadable. "You've been hurt before," he added softly. "I can see it," her stomach twisted. How could he possibly know? She had kept her past locked away, a secret shadow. But looking into his eyes, she felt no malice, only a strange empathy. I left someone," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "He wasn't good for me." He nodded slowly, as if he understood everything without needing more words. "Then you're free now, and that freedom is yours to protect." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of drinks and small talk. Lucia learned the rhythm of the bar, the subtle gestures of efficiency, the quiet way the patrons observed the space as much as the drinks. But even in the midst of this mundane chaos, she couldn't shake the sense that she was being watched, not in a threatening way, but with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Later that night, after closing, he walked her to the door. The streets were quiet, slick with recent rain. Streetlights cast long reflections on the wet pavement. Lucia felt exposed, small, yet alive. "You'll be safe here," he said, his tone soft but firm. "As long as you follow the rules, no one will harm you." Something about the weight of his words sent a shiver down her spine. "Thank you," she replied, unsure if she was thanking him for the offer of work or for the invisible shield she already felt around her. The next days were a mixture of routine and subtle tension. Lucia became familiar with the bar's patrons, some regulars with kind smiles, others who murmured too much and glanced over their shoulders. And Dante, the man who owned the bar, remained a constant presence. He watched, quietly corrected, sometimes offered a rare compliment. Every interaction was layered, like a game she didn't fully understand but couldn't resist playing. One evening, while wiping down a table near the corner, she noticed a man slip into the bar. His movements were hurried, nervous. He met Dante's gaze, and in an instant, the air seemed to change. A subtle, almost imperceptible tension gripped the room. Lucia froze, sensing danger she didn't yet understand. Dante moved swiftly, decisively. The man tried to approach a patron, but Dante's hand rested lightly on his shoulder, a simple gesture that radiated authority. "Not here," Dante said calmly. The man's eyes widened and he backed away, disappearing into the night. Lucia's heart raced. The man's presence had been a threat, yet Dante had handled it so easily, so naturally. She realized, with a sinking feeling, that there was more to him than a simple bar owner. He was powerful, dangerous, in a way she didn't yet want to know. That night, as she closed up the bar, Dante approached her. "You did well today," he said. "You stayed calm when others might have panicked. I just did what seemed right," she murmured, still shaken. He nodded, his eyes studying her face. "Fear is natural. Control is necessary. But courage is rare." Lucia didn't know why, but his words touched something deep within her, a part of her that had long been buried under fear and doubt. She wanted to believe him, to trust him, but the memory of her ex's control tugged at her. She could not afford to let anyone close, not yet. Days passed. Lucia began to settle into the rhythm of her new life. She learned the nuances of the bar, the subtle hierarchy of the staff, the silent understanding between Dante and his regulars. She also noticed small things: how he lingered at the edge of the room when she entered, how his gaze softened when she laughed, and how he seemed to anticipate problems before they arose. Despite her growing fascination, she kept her distance. She had learned the hard way that charm could hide danger, that beauty could conceal control. Yet something about Dante was different. He didn't demand obedience. He offered protection, but not possession. Then, one night, everything changed. A rival group entered the bar, their intentions unmistakable. The air grew heavy, charged with unspoken threats. Lucia felt the hairs on her arms rise. Patrons murmured nervously, but Dante remained calm. His presence filled the room, an unyielding force that drew attention and respect without a single shout. The confrontation was swift. Words were exchanged, but no one raised a hand, not until the rival tried to push past Dante. Then the tension exploded. Dante moved with a fluid grace, a presence both terrifying and magnetic. Within moments, the threat was neutralized. The rivals left, their faces pale and uneasy. Lucia stood frozen, her heart pounding. She had never seen such power, such control, and yet something in the way Dante handled it stirred a strange feeling within her. Fear, awe, fascination. After the crowd dispersed, Dante approached her. "Are you all right?" he asked, his tone calm but carrying an edge of concern. I think so," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "You have courage," he said, his eyes locking with hers. "And I admire that. But remember, this world can be unforgiving. Always be aware." Lucia nodded, swallowing hard. She wanted to ask more, to understand him, to ask about the threats, about his world. But something told her that she wasn't ready. Not yet. As she walked home that night, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets glistening. She felt a mix of fear and exhilaration. Her life had changed, and she knew there was no turning back. For the first time in a long while, she felt alive, but the question lingered. How much could she trust the man who had saved her? She didn't know that Dante watched from the shadows, silently ensuring her safety. And though he never intervened without cause, he felt an unfamiliar pull toward her, a desire to protect, to guide, to see her thrive. The night whispered possibilities, and for the first time Lucia dared to imagine a life free from fear. Yet shadows lingered, and in those shadows, Dante's world waited, a world of danger, power, and secrets she could never yet imagine. And so, the first chapter of her new life ended not with peace, but with anticipation. Something had begun, something neither of them could yet name. And both of them knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new tests, and the possibility of something far greater than either expected. The next morning, Lucia awoke to the pale sunlight filtering through her small apartment window. The events of the previous night replayed in her mind. The sudden tension at the bar, Dante's quiet but undeniable authority, and the sense of danger that had brushed past her like a cold wind. She had survived, but the memory of it left her heart pounding and her thoughts spinning. She dressed quickly and made her way to the bar. The streets were alive with the hum of the city, but she felt as though she moved in a bubble separate from the world. She kept replaying Dante's words in her mind. "You're safe here? As long as you stay close to me." The weight of them lingered, strange and compelling. When she arrived, Dante was already there, moving behind the bar with the quiet grace of someone completely in control. He noticed her immediately. His gaze softened as their eyes met, but it still carried that same depth that both unsettled and fascinated her. "Good morning," he said, his voice calm, measured, yet carrying a warmth that surprised her. "Morning," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. She had to remind herself that this was just work, nothing more. The day passed with the usual rhythm, cleaning, serving, learning, observing. Yet Lucia felt different, aware of Dante's presence in a way she hadn't before. It was not just the danger, but the subtle attention he paid her, the small gestures that seemed protective rather than controlling. During a quiet moment, he approached her again. "You've changed since yesterday," he said, leaning lightly against the counter. "You're calmer, more assured." Lucia felt a flush rise to her cheeks. I guess I'm just getting used to it," she murmured. Dante's eyes searched hers. "No, you're stronger than you realize. You're learning to trust yourself again." She looked away, unsettled by how accurately he had read her. She wanted to ask him how he knew so much, but she didn't. Instead, she focused on the glass she was polishing, letting the silence stretch between them. Evenings at the bar grew more complex. Patrons came and went, some friendly, some sharp-eyed and mysterious. Lucia noticed that Dante's attention shifted subtly depending on who entered. He was always alert, always calculating. She began to sense the hidden layers of his life, the power he held beneath the calm exterior. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the city lights flickered on, a man entered the bar with a clear purpose. His eyes scanned the room, lingering on Dante. Lucia's instinct screamed that something was wrong. She wanted to step back, to hide, but Dante's calm presence steadied her. The man approached Dante, speaking in low, hurried tones. Lucia couldn't hear the words, but she saw the tension coil in Dante's shoulders. The stranger's movements were sharp, urgent, but Dante didn't move hastily. He stood firm, his presence a barrier that radiated authority and quiet power. Within moments, the man retreated, defeated, and Lucia felt a shiver run down her spine. Dante's control had been absolute, terrifying yet mesmerizing. After the bar emptied, Dante turned to her. "You handled yourself well tonight," he said, his voice soft but carrying an edge of something unspoken. I just stayed out of the way," she murmured. "Bravery isn't always about facing danger head-on," he said. "Sometimes it's about holding your ground when fear surrounds you." "You did that." Lucia felt her chest tighten. His words were meant to reassure, but they also stirred something unfamiliar. She was not used to being seen, truly seen by anyone. Not like this. Days turned into weeks, and Lucia began to feel a subtle shift within herself. She was regaining confidence, learning to trust her instincts again. And Dante? He was no longer just the enigmatic bar owner. He had become a constant presence in her life, a figure she couldn't ignore. They shared quiet moments, passing glances, small smiles, the occasional conversation that lingered longer than necessary. Every interaction carried a weight, an unspoken understanding that something deeper was growing between them. Lucia's heart responded in ways she hadn't anticipated, a mixture of fear and longing. One rainy evening, as the city streets glistened under the downpour, a threat emerged that was impossible to ignore. A group of men, clearly not ordinary patrons, loitered outside the bar. Dante noticed them immediately, his posture shifting subtly, the calm replaced by a barely restrained intensity. Lucia felt the tension in the air like static electricity. "Stay behind me," Dante said softly, his voice steady but firm. Lucia obeyed, her heart racing. She watched as Dante moved with an ease and authority that left her both terrified and awed. The strangers made a brief attempt at intimidation, but Dante's presence alone made them hesitate. Within moments they retreated, and the bar was safe once again. Lucia's hands trembled slightly. She had faced fear, but it was different this time. She had stood by someone who was both protector and mystery. Dante approached her, his expression unreadable. "You are stronger than you think," he said quietly. "And you're learning fast." She looked up at him, noticing for the first time the faint vulnerability behind his commanding presence. I don't know why, but I feel safe with you," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. His gaze softened, and for a moment, the danger, the city, the world outside the bar seemed to disappear. "You are," he said simply, "and I will do what I must to keep it that way." The following days were a mix of ordinary work and extraordinary tension. Lucia began to notice small things, how Dante would ensure she was never alone during risky moments, how he observed the bar from angles she hadn't noticed, always protective, always calculating. She realized that she had become part of his world, whether she wanted to or not. Despite the growing closeness, Lucia remained cautious. Her past had taught her to fear control, to resist attachment. Yet with Dante it was different. He never demanded anything from her. He offered protection, guidance, and a quiet respect she hadn't expected. One quiet night when the bar had emptied and only the soft hum of the city remained outside, Dante spoke again. "Lucia, do you trust yourself?" She hesitated, thinking of her past, of the fear that had ruled her life. "I want to," she said softly. "That is the first step," he said, his eyes holding hers. "You don't need to trust me fully yet, but you must trust yourself. That is how you will survive in this world and thrive." His words resonated within her. She realized that courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to move forward despite it. And with Dante by her side, the path seemed less daunting, though still filled with uncertainty. Then, as if the universe was testing her resolve, news came that her ex had been spotted in the city. Lucia felt a rush of panic, memories of control and fear flooding back. She knew she could not face him alone. Dante sensed the shift immediately. "We will handle this," he said, his voice calm but firm. "You do not need to face him alone." Lucia's chest tightened. For the first time in a long while, she felt relief mingled with a strange warmth, an acknowledgement that someone powerful and caring could exist in her life without threatening her. Independence. The night they prepared for the inevitable encounter, Dante and Lucia stood side by side, two figures facing the unknown. He didn't hold her hand, didn't pull her close. Yet his presence was enough to steady her, to make her feel braver than she had in years. When the moment came, her ex appeared, confrontational, but Lucia did not falter. With Dante silently backing her, she spoke with a clarity and strength that surprised even herself. She made it clear that her life was no longer his to control, that she was free, and that freedom was non-negotiable. Her ex left, frustrated and defeated, and Lucia felt a surge of triumph and relief. She had faced her past, and she had survived, not just with Dante's help, but with her own courage. Afterwards, they walked through the quiet streets, rain glistening on the pavement. The city felt alive, filled with possibilities. Lucia glanced at Dante, and for the first time, she allowed herself to wonder about the future, about him, about the life she was beginning to reclaim. Dante looked at her, his expression unreadable but his eyes soft. "You've grown stronger," he said, "and I've seen a side of you that is extraordinary." Lucia smiled faintly. "I couldn't have done it without you," she admitted. "You could have," he replied, his voice gentle. "I only ensured you had the space to realize it yourself." As they returned to the bar, the city lights reflected in the puddles around them. Lucia felt a cautious hope, a sense that this new life, though filled with danger and uncertainty, held the promise of something more. something deep, something real. But as they entered the bar, neither of them noticed the shadow slipping through the alley across the street, watching. The story was far from over. New challenges, new threats, and new discoveries awaited them both. And the connection between them, born of fear, courage, and unspoken longing, was only beginning to unfold.